Before we get into the video, do not forget to like, comment and subscribe. Now just before I start, I want to say I appreciate everybody that's watching these videos. Now that's all said and done, let's get down to it. So it's very rare for a child or a teenage murderer to be named, but the courts have decided it was in the public's interest to name convicted murderer 16-year-old Joshua Sparks after he stabbed a dad of 4 to death when the dad had been celebrating his twin daughter's birthdays. Now this death should never have happened. It wasn't a fight, it wasn't a beef, and the murdered victim, James Gibbons, hadn't instigated trouble at all. He hadn't belittled 16-year-old Joshua Sparks either. Fundamentally, James Gibbons was slaughtered because he challenged some thuggish and idiotic teenagers for harassing a homeless man. Again, James Gibbons was murdered because he told a group of teenagers to leave a homeless man alone. Now this murder took place outside James's home in Laindon, Essex. So, on the day of his twin daughter's birthdays, James Gibbons had been barbecuing when he saw Christopher French approach, aka the homeless man. Now because James is a good Samaritan, he handed Christopher some hot food, a blanket, sleeping bags and a pillow. Now while James and the homeless man were talking, 16-year-old Joshua Sparks and a mate split off from the larger group, walked over to James and Christopher and pulled on the homeless man's hoodie and then tried to snatch the food out of Christopher's hand. After all, because 16-year-old Joshua and his mates are pieces of shit. Now when confronted, Joshua tucked his tail between his legs and walked away because he is a coward. But soon he came back with his larger group of mates because, as you know, people feel more comfortable when they are in a gang. That old philosophy, safer in numbers. Now the group of teenagers surrounded James Gibbons and at some point they led him into an alleyway right by his house. A sound was made and soon after James Gibbons came out stumbling, suffering from severe and fatal stab wounds. The court heard how Christopher had seen James Gibbons stumble as he desperately tried to wobble/walk back home, but sadly he collapsed. Now, as for 16-year-old Joshua Sparks, the court heard in the aftermath of James Gibbons' death, he was seen boasting to friends as to what had just transpired. And of course, 16-year-old Joshua Sparks denied murder. In his head, he thought bringing more idiotic friends to try and intimidate a grown man was self-defense. Because what? He was embarrassed, and he got shamed for messing with a homeless man. Remember, James Gibbons was a man, he was a dad, and he was a faithful partner. He provided for his family by working hard. He helped people in need. He was a bona fide hero, and some scumbag of a kid took all that away. Joshua Sparks has ruined countless of lives. The judge also said that Joshua Sparks will spend a minimum term of 13 years in prison, as he has been jailed for what is being deemed as life. Good riddance. Stay safe.